Morning, all. All right, so I'm going to talk about the Buffalo Sabres to start today, if that's all right with everybody. And if it's not, I do apologize. All right, so the Buffalo Sabres, there's some hype around this team. And I've seen some saying it's just too much hype. They aren't necessarily going to be a playoff team based on the fact they haven't been a playoff team in a long time. And there is something to the idea that one good season doesn't necessarily mean another good season after, an upward momentum from one year to the next doesn't mean that continues. But Buffalo's case is a pretty good team. So first we'll look at the top six, keeping in mind that Jack Quinn is missing the start of the season with an Achilles injury, and he could come back in October, he could come back in November. I would say it's likely about mid-November because that's right in the middle of when he's scheduled to come back. But either way, they're going to have to go without Quinn for a while, and they've got a pretty solid top six without Quinn. You have Skinner coming off of arguably his best season in the NHL. Paterka has been very good for them on the wing, and experience is going to make him better, I think. Tage Thompson had a career year, and the debate then becomes, so is that his career year and his numbers are going to fall, or is he going to be able to sustain that? Can he get to 100 points? Can he get to 50 goals? He can get to 50 goals. He can get to 100 points. I think the really important part is to make sure that the offense continues to be diverse, that you're not just having to shut down Thompson. And that's where Cousins comes in. Cousins coming off of a great year. Tuck coming off of a great year as well. And then Olofsson, sometimes the forgotten member of this team when it comes to the goal scoring, but Olofsson's been a pretty good goal scorer throughout his career as well. So there's a lot of goals in that top six. There's a lot of points. There's a lot of skill in that top six. And again, that's without Jack Quinn, who's going to come back during the season and could very well inject more speed, more offense into this group. Now, the top four is interesting because Dahlin and Power, I think, might be the happiest players right now. Although Dahlin is rumored to have agreed to a $10 million plus extension. Hasn't been announced yet, but $10 million plus in terms of cap hit. Dahlin may very well justify that very, very quickly. But Owen Power is due next summer as well. Owen Power is due a raise. And he has to look at what Sanderson got and say, I think I have as much upside as Jake Sanderson. So it may make things a little more expensive for Buffalo to keep Power around. The good news is their cap space after this year is good. Now, it's possible that they look at a bridge deal for Power, but I don't think so. I think it'll be 8 years, and we're all going to act surprised when it's a lot of money. But then you've got Samuelsson, and if Samuelsson stays healthy, this should help them too. Samuelsson got hurt early last year, and it absolutely seemed to wreck their defense for the time he was out. And Connor Clifton added from Boston, as I've mentioned, that brings some physicality to the blue line. He's solid defensively, can provide you about 20, 25 points as well. And so it does add a different dimension to the game because Buffalo, as I said all through last season, they really weren't interested in hitting. It was very common for me to have 20 hits for the team that was against them, and they might have 5. So we'll see if Buffalo's game changes. They definitely need to be tougher to play against. Now, one question mark for me is somewhat goaltending, and I say this because while Levi is the future, the question becomes if you're going to have a team that is going to come out of nowhere, well, not out of nowhere, but a team's finally going to get back above the playoff line for the first time since 2011. Do you want Levi to have that responsibility and put that on him? Right? Luukkonen is there as well. Luukkonen with more experience, but Luukkonen's numbers have been mediocre the last couple of years. And then you've got Comrie. Comrie, of course, the veteran presence, but can he stay healthy? And what are you going to get from Comrie? Overall, the save percentage this team put up was .896 this past season. That needs to come up. They have to have a save percentage that's around that league average, which I think now is at about .905. So if they can get that save percentage up, and if the defense holds up in front of them, and again, Samuelsson's healthy, their numbers should get better. And then a couple of question marks about players and whether or not they're ready. Matthew Savoy is expected to come up and play for them. Unlikely to get top 6 minutes unless he pushes somebody else out. And then you've got Ryan Johnson, who of course was the last piece out of the Ryan O'Reilly deal. And Ryan Johnson may very well end up on that third pairing. And again, there's a good, strong, deep defense here in Buffalo, which includes now Eric Johnson. So multiple Johnsons on this team. And so we'll see how it all goes. And then you've got a few here that I think are kind of wild cards. So Casey Middlestad, This past season, 82 games, 15 goals, 44 assists, 59 points. Really solid season by Middlestad. And I think he's capable of improving his goals to about 20. And we'll see if the points improve with it. Peyton Krebs, 74 games, 9 goals, 17 assists, 26 points. Krebs, of course, came over from Vegas in the deal for Jack Eichel, along with Tuck. And that trade seems to have worked out for both teams. Buffalo gets productive players, and Vegas gets themselves a Stanley Cup, which Eichel was a prominent part of. So both teams pretty happy with that trade. I don't think we can make the argument that if Buffalo doesn't trade Eichel, that they would have won the Cup last year. So Eichel gets his Cup, and Buffalo gets their chance to maybe get back into the playoffs. And then Jordan Greenway, who after the trade from Minnesota in 17 games just recorded the 4 goals, no assists. Greenway needs to have a bounce-back season. And again, this is a team that needs a little bit more in the way of hitting, a little bit more in the way of the physical play. And if Greenway can provide that along with a little bit more offense than he did when he came over from Minnesota, that could absolutely be beneficial to them as well. And then when you keep in mind, too, that the last time this team made the playoffs was 2011, the last time this team won a round was 2007, you're going to have a fan base in Buffalo that I think the patience has waned at times over the last 12 years. Completely understandable, but it does feel like some of that excitement is there now. We'll see what happens. Interestingly enough, too, since moving to the Atlantic Division, the previously, of course, in the Northeast, and the Atlantic 5th, which is where they finished this past season, that's the highest they've been in that division. So they have never been in the top half of the division. Is this the year? We'll see. There are plenty of people who think they can be. Now, their schedule is not rough to start the season. I know I talked about this in the season preview. We'll look at it a little more in depth. So they start the season at home against the New York Rangers. Good test out of the gate, right? That's on the 12th. Then on the 14th, they're at UBS Arena against the Islanders. And on the 17th, they come home against Tampa. So it's home, away, home. You don't really get a rhythm going. But then the 19th, they're at home against Calgary. The 21st, they're at home against the Islanders. The 23rd, they're at home against Montreal. So it's a 4-game homestand. You've got Calgary and Montreal. They should win those at home, right? The Islanders, that again, if they're going to get above the playoff line, they should win. And Tampa Bay should be really strong and a really good test. But that's 1 out of 4 games there, right? That you could look at and say if they lose that game, not necessarily a big deal. Then they go to Ottawa on the 24th, so it's back-to-back there. Second night is in Ottawa. And then the 27th, they're in New Jersey. And on the 29th, they're at home against Colorado. So October is not awful, keeping in mind that in November, 10 of 14 games are on the road. So November is going to be a test. And really, you know, the test last year was November as well. November 4th to 18th last season, they lost 8 in a row in regulation, which is why they don't make the playoffs. You can't make the playoffs in November, but you can certainly miss the playoffs as a result of what happens in November. I've heard that one before. I'm mentioning it here. They did win 9 of their final 12 games. However, prior to that, they lost 8 out of 9. So consistency was absolutely an issue. Don Granato needs to make sure these guys get off to that good start and then that they maintain it. You can't have 8 in a row in regulation that you drop, and you can't lose 8 out of 9 when you're supposed to be in a playoff battle. So winning 9 of the final 12 is great, but they have to avoid that losing streak. And having 2 losing streaks, one after a really strong start that kind of killed that strong start, and then one here that really killed their chances of making the playoffs, they have to avoid that. Now, when they scored first this past season, they were 29-7-3. When the opposition scored first, they were 13-26-4. So the first thing that stands out there, they scored first in less than half of their games. Bit of a surprise because this is a team that scored very, very well. This is a team that was top 5 in the league when it came to goal scoring. So the fact they don't often score first in a season like that is a bit of a surprise. But defensively, they had issues. Goaltending, there were issues. So you're fighting from behind a little bit too often. And if they're really and truly going to make it into the playoffs, they got to be better there. But they also have to be better at home. At home, they were 17-20-4. And then on the road, they were 25-13-3. So last year, there were times where homestands did not help them. And then they go out on the road. And I felt like, hey, they got a better chance tonight because they weren't in Buffalo. Which, again, when you're trying to win your fan base back and get them to buy tickets, it doesn't help when you're losing games in front of them that regularly. So they got to fix that. They were third in goals scored this past season and 26th in goals against. They know they need to fix that, so they went out, they got Clifton. I think there's an expectation Levi's going to not necessarily fix the goaltending, but at least improve it, right? The 91 points they had this past season is the most they've had in a season since 2010-2011. And it was 16 points better than their total in 2021-2022. It also was their first time above 500 in about a decade. So this is a team that has found ways to lose. And so they have to get rid of that. They have to make sure that they have that good start and they keep that up. Tage Thompson will be watched. 78 games, 47 goals, 47 assists, 94 points. If he can score at that same rate again, that definitely helps. They were only 1 point behind Florida, but they were also only 2 points behind the Islanders and 7 points behind Tampa Bay. So if they fix their home record and if they don't allow the first goal as often as last year, they were very good when they scored first, then they make up that deficit pretty quickly, right? Now, without overtime, so this is one thing that they have on Hockey Reference, which is interesting. They were 30, 33, and 19 if you don't include overtime. They were 3-3 in shootouts. They were 9-4 in overtime. So very good in overtime, very good in the 3-on-3, and a team that had its struggles here and there. So they're not a shoo-in for the playoffs, but is this the year where they finally get back above the line? I hope so. I hope so because it's been many, many years of suffering for Buffalo fans. I do feel bad for them, and so hopefully this is the year that things go well. I will say with Dahlin and Power and with the fact that you could have one play half the game, the other play the other half of the game, it really helps. And as long as they stay healthy, this team should get better in terms of the goals against. And if Devin Levi gives them the goaltending that they expect, that should help the save percentage as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Are you on the hype train for the Buffalo Sabres or are you not? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.